Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well today. Let's take a look at the types and causes of unemployment and understanding how they are different. Okay, so take a look at this next slide. One of the first things you need to understand is that is two things, I guess. The labor market diagram, which is expressed right here, and this concept, the natural rate of unemployment, which is that the level of unemployment that prevails in an economy that is producing at full employment level of output. Okay, so if you haven't seen the labor market diagram video, I would suggest that you watch that video first because I'm going to go through this really quickly as a reminder. Remember, the aggregate, or rather the labor market diagram, is an expression of the supply and demand of labor and workers in the marketplace. Or sorry, the demanders for labor and the suppliers of labor in the marketplace. What does that mean? Well, this aggregate demand for labor curve represents firms, businesses, interest in consuming other people's labor, okay? And the aggregate supply of labor curve represents workers' willingness and ability to accept a certain wage rate. So this is a collection of aggregate supply of labor. Who is that? Those are workers. And aggregate demand for labor. Who demands labor? Firms. Okay. And this yellow curve here is the labor force curve, which represents the total amount of adults or working age people in a society. And the magic thing to know here, of course, right, is that the gap here between A and B, right here, this represents the natural rate of unemployment, and that deserves a big old green star right there. Look at that, okay? So the natural rate of unemployment can be expressed in a diagram of the labor market as the gap between the difference between the equilibrium aggregate supply, the equilibrium wage and quantity of workers, wow, in the marketplace where the aggregate supply of labor meets the aggregate demand of labor, as opposed to the total labor force. All right, so you should have that idea in your head. Now let's look at a few types of the four different types of unemployment and their causes. Here we go. Okay, so there are four types of unemployment, and one of them has two names. Okay, so let's first look at cyclical or demand deficient unemployment, and this is the unemployment that you would expect in an economy that is not working well, right? During a recession. Cyclical unemployment or demand deficient unemployment is caused by the recession phase of the business cycle. It could be caused by a fall in demand for the nation's output, which results in a loss of jobs in the economy. We'd call this demand deficient unemployment. Or it could result from a negative supply shock to the economy, which an example of that's a drop in aggregate supply in the economy, which could be as a result of the cost of factors of production suddenly increasing, which would lead to fewer workers hired. And the example of this would be like really fast, like increase in the price of energy, oil, gasoline. Okay, so this demand deficient or cyclical unemployment, this is the kind of unemployment that you're going to express on your using the labor force diagram, and in further videos you'll see. Also, you could express this using the aggregate demand and aggregate supply video. Okay, so that's number one, cyclical demand deficient unemployment. Now, here's the key piece. Look underneath, look down here. Natural rate of unemployment is comprised of three different kinds of unemployment: frictional, seasonal, and structural. So the natural rate of unemployment is the level of unemployment that prevails in an economy that is producing at its full employment level of output. And it includes frictional, seasonal, and structural unemployment. So natural rate of unemployment is what is natural in a growing, thriving economy. How is that possible, you might add? Well, you have to look at the different components of the natural rate of unemployment to understand it. So let's first look at frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment is the short-term unemployment that occurs when people are between jobs, or they have left education and waiting to take their first job. It is regarded as somewhat desirable because it indicates flexibility in the labor market. Look, if I quit my job teaching at the International School Nido de Aguilas right now in Santiago, Chile, to take another job in Chile, then what does it say? Well, it's actually quite desirable. It actually says, hey, the Chilean labor market is good. There are jobs available. I can quit one job and go start another job. Okay? So frictional unemployment is always going to be happening in a thriving economy, and that's why it's part of this natural rate of unemployment. Second component of the natural rate of unemployment, seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment is the short-term unemployment caused by a change in the, you guessed it, folks, seasons. What is that example of? Farmers, ski instructors, surf schools, tourism-related industries, right? And I live in Santiago, and when it's winter, there's a bunch of people working up at the ski resorts, and as soon as winter's over, where do all those people go? Well, that's seasonal unemployment. They don't have a job anymore. Many of them go off and be surf instructors down at the beach, but there is still a period of seasonal unemployment as the winter ends, but the summer hasn't started, and those people are not working. But that's natural. That is not a cause for concern in the environment, in the unemployment sector. And then lastly, there's structural unemployment. Structural unemployment occurs when there is a permanent fall in the demand for a particular type of labor. And this is natural in a growing economy. And examples of this would be new technologies might make some jobs obsolete, the lower cost of foreign labor, maybe a company takes some business. There was an entire city in Indiana in the United States that its economy collapsed because of structural unemployment, because the main industry there was producing socks. And the Haynes Company took their factory that was in this small town in Indiana and moved it to Mexico. And guess what? There's a massive amount of structural unemployment in that town, and that's because of the lower cost of foreign labor, because this firm could pay workers less in Mexico than they had to in the United States. But that's considered part of the natural flow of things. As an economy grows, these things are going to happen, right? Change in consumer tastes. So frictional unemployment, frictional unemployment, seasonal unemployment, structural unemployment, all part of the natural rate of unemployment, which means that these three aspects should make up in an industrialized society, roughly 5% of the workforce is going to be unemployed at any one time. And that's seen as natural. That's seen as okay, because that means that there's flexibility in the labor market. It's just a simple change in seasons, or some things become obsolete, and that's just the way that it goes. That doesn't mean that there's an economic downturn. Okay. However, the cyclical or demand deficient unemployment, which is why I made this box yellow, right, can be seen as harmful to the economy. And this is the kind of unemployment that you see in the news, right? Demand deficient. People are losing their jobs, which means that they're buying less, which means that there's less demand, which means there's more people laid off, and it becomes a cycle. Okay, or there's some sort of negative supply shock, as the United States saw, in 2008-9, when all of a sudden gas prices went up through $4 or $5 a gallon. Okay, but that is not part of the normal natural rate of unemployment. Okay, so make sure you have a good understanding of these four types of unemployment, and let's take a look at the next slide. Expressing cyclical or demand deficient unemployment, I would suggest there's a whole video on this that you take a look at. And all I'm going to say very quickly in this is that you can see as aggregate demand drops in the marketplace, this is a Keynesian view, a drop in aggregate demand is going to result in an inward shift of the aggregate demand of labor, because as people buy fewer things, then there is going to be less. Suppliers are going to be less willing to supply something in the marketplace. At any time suppliers are less willing to supply something, guess what? There's going to be less demand, aggregate demand for labor. Remember, ADL represents firms' interest in hiring people, and you're going to see an inward shift of the aggregate demand for labor curve as a result of a drop in aggregate demand in the economy. Okay? If that doesn't make complete sense to you, take a look at the other video expressing cyclical or demand deficient unemployment in the marketplace. All right, I hope you found this video to be helpful, and we'll talk to you in a bit.